This video was made possible by EA Game Changers. F1 2021 is finally here. The moment has arrived, guys. I'm very excited. If you're new to the channel, then get subscribed because I've got a couple more videos lined up for you guys over the course of the next week. And also, if you're going to enjoy this video right here, leave a like. It's going to be this video and two more. They're all going to be about 15 minutes long, so hopefully you're excited. And in this one today, we're going to be talking about world records, setups, how the handling is, and also my impressions on the F1 game. I want to stress this is a work in progress build, so things are still very much unfinished and things are still being wrapped up. So if you see things you don't like, don't worry about it. It's been great fun. I've really enjoyed it so far. We've still got a few more days yet with this build, but for this video we're going to focus on showcasing 6 different cars, 6 different circuits, and 6 world records which I currently own on the F1 game. Now in the background you've been seeing some pictures of the game so far. These are pictures that were sent to me by Codemasters, but we're now going to move into the actual cars. Now in this one here today you can see we've got a bit of an overview slash a preview of the cars and how they look in game. So at the moment we've got all 9 cars except for Ferrari, the 10th one. The Ferrari car is still an FOM slash generic car, and as you can see we have the Mercedes in the background. We've also got the Red Bull, and all the cars, I've got to be honest, look decent, mate. You know, everything's good, everything's up to date, and even in this kind of, you know, preview screen you can see the Red Bull has a lot more rake than the Mercedes. But we've also got the McLaren here, of course, a really nice car. I personally really like it. Stay tuned because we're going to be doing 6 hot laps, and it's going to be Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull, Aston Martin, Alpine and Haas. We're going to be using those cars here today. Speaking of the Aston Martin, here she is, looking absolutely insane. The kind of green metallic paint looks so sweet. And the Alpine, which is the next car we're going to have a look at. Of course, you know, cars in general with metallic kind of paint schemes always look good, and the Alpine of course is another one of those cars for that. But yeah, really nice. Cody's done a great job with the car models, and also especially I've noticed the metallic paints look really nice. They've done a great job with those. Yeah, here is a Ferrari. As I mentioned, it is the FOM car, so not the actual chassis, so the black wheels, and also no Mission Renault. Again, I'll mention it now before everyone asks in the comments. Tobacco related sponsoring is not allowed in a game which is PEGI 3 rated, which is the case for F1 games, so bear that in mind. Here is the AlphaTauri, of course, driven by Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda. The Alfa Romeo, of course, in my opinion, probably the best looking car on the grid. If not, it's in the top 3, like I mentioned, with Aston Martin and Alpine. Then we look at the Haas car. Now we're going to be using this one later on, I believe, at Baku. And then finally, the car that I use in my own Road to Glory career mode, the Williams. There's all the cars. We're now going to move into the first hot lap at Bahrain. The lap itself is actually up I'm quite happy with. All these laps are pretty decent. I put in quite a bit of time. Setups this year are completely different, so that's something I've been working on quite hard. And in terms of the cars themselves, as you guys watch the laps in the background, I think this year there's going to be quite, I think, an interesting dynamic with car setups. I think they're a lot different to last year, and I'm not really sure what an optimal setup looks like right now. It's still very early days, of course, but it's nothing like last year's game. You know, I've used setups from my league racing, races from F1 2020, and the car just can't even make it past one corner. The car will just spin. Especially if it's like medium to high speed, the car just completely spins around on you. So the setups are just way different this year in so many aspects, and I'll run you through the setups that I use for each of these hot laps as well briefly, even though they're of no major relevance because things again could easily change, work in progress. I think it's good just for references because we'll look back on this video in like 3 months time and maybe things have changed, and we'll realize, oh wow, that was actually a terrible setup. So yeah, currently on this lap so far, things I've noticed around Bahrain, it seems like Bahrain combined with the 2021 cars, it's a bit more of an easy track to drive in my opinion. The slow speed corners are quite fast in these cars this year. I think not ideal for me. I think the cars need to be a little bit slower in slow speed. In the high speed though, you can notice they've actually nerfed the cars a bit. So in line with the regulation change this year where the cars are made slower, the cars are not as good in high speed corners. In terms of the setup though for this one, I was using 4/8 wings 80-60 in the differential, which is very different. The camber and the toe pretty similar to F1 2020, 1-1, 10-10, 4-7 on the suspension, which is quite different. And then also crucially this year, the brake bias and the tyre pressures this year seem to be different. So I don't think minimal tyre pressures are the way to go anymore this year. Also, brake bias, the lowest I've been able to go is about 55. So any lower than that, it's pretty much impossible to get a decent kind of late braking corner because the back end will overtake the front end. So Australia is the first of two tracks like Spain, which I will say there's no changes to the track layout. I've had it confirmed to me by Codemasters, and we was part of a special private event last week. The tracks that are back from 2020 have been unchanged. So Australia and Spain will not have the modifications that they will have in real life. Codemasters right now are just focused on trying to get Imola, Portimao and Jeddah done as fast as possible to add them to the game. So for this year's game cycle, Australia and Spain will remain the same for at least one more year. So hopefully next year those tracks will get updated, and that has been officially confirmed to me. Now, in regards to Australia, again, talking like, we spoke about Bahrain, now we're going to talk about Australia. This track is great fun, and this section right here, the left-right, as I mentioned in Bahrain, the cars were a bit different in high speed, and you can really notice it through here. So you can't take that chicane like last year because you understeer so much through the left-hander that you're just not going to make the right-hander. It's literally impossible. You have to really use the brake. I feel like trail braking is going to be a big thing this year to help kind of, let's say, recover the lost front end in the fast corners to mid corners, especially with a bit of braking involved. You're going to need that trail braking to really help get the nose turned in and rotate the back end. So yeah, we set a 19.6, which is a pretty decent time, pretty similar to F1 2020, whereas Bahrain was about 3-4 seconds faster than what it was in real life, for example. I think there's a bit of lap time discrepancy that needs to be worked on, especially Bahrain was one that I noticed. Setup wise, you can see on screen, a bit different this time around, so the camber is a bit more centralized, and then also on the suspension, 8.8 roll bars, which is something that you'd never do in F1 2020. The rider height 3.6 as well, which is something you don't often see. I think a big reason why the car spins in pretty much with any kind of an F1 2020-esque setup is if you run the low ride heights, the car, you can just feel bottoms out and you just spin straight away. So this time we're using the Alpine in reference and tribute to Alonso, of course, at the Spanish Grand Prix. And as I mentioned, this track is the same as last year, so no changes to the circuit. Very, very minor ones, but in general, it won't have the new turn 10, so bear with me on that. A couple of screen freezes, same for everyone. Work in progress, not fully optimized yet. But again, here, so turn 1 and 2 is fine, but turn 3, you need to have a good setup, because otherwise turn 3 is not flat. You can't take it flat if you have a default setup, for example. You need to really throw on the aerodynamic kind of positively, put a lot more front air on to take turn 3 flat, otherwise you're not going to make it. The car just went straight off into the gravel for me on my first attempt. And then other corners where you can notice that kind of aero wash and aero push where these cars are not as fast this year is this next corner right now. So turn 9 is not flat. You have to take quite a respectable lift to keep the car stable. And I'll mention this again when we get to Silverstone as well. In terms of the slow speed, I mentioned it to Codemasters, I feel like the cars are a little bit too fast. I think they need a bit of a nerf. This Sector 3 is very, very quick, and I don't think that was the case in real life. So I do think things need a bit of an adjustment here, especially if you compare the lap time I'm going to set right now to the real life pole time this year. Similar to Bahrain, it's a little bit out of line. So I feel like hopefully the pace of the cars will get adjusted slightly. For reference, again, the Q3 time this year was a 1:16.7, and we was well over 2 seconds faster. So for me, that needs a slight tweak, because these setups aren't even necessarily the fastest ones. This is only my first few days with the game. But yeah, pace-wise, a 14.5. But here we go then. So a lap of Baku, similar to last year, but a few things to note here in terms of, difference compared to the way you drive on F1 2020. So the first two corners are pretty much the same. One thing I would say is this is one of those tracks where 55 brake bias could be better than 56. You do have a bit of rear locking, but it kind of helps compensate for the low downforce, and you can kind of get the car turned in a little bit. I will say they've improved the way the car feels on the grip levels outside of the white line. So for example, on the left here, you can actually traction up quite nicely through there now, whereas last year you couldn't, which is good. So I like that a lot. And straight line braking, very important this year, I've noticed. If you brake, whilst turning, you're going to struggle. So really important to straight line brake this year. And then also certain curbs have been made a bit flatter, I feel like. They're a little bit easier to drive. Caster section here, you need to hit this right, because that curb on the left-hander, if you hit it at the wrong angle, it really destabilizes the car this year. Again, using the outside of the track, no issues with traction there whatsoever, at least in time trial. Then flat out through here as we approach this very, very tricky left-hander, the corner that everybody hates, myself included, and I just stay a long way off the curb, just tractioning basically off the track again, and also using this outside of the track to brake for the next left-hander, and that will be the end of the lap here at Baku. So another decent lap, keeping that pace going, and the car working very, very well. And I was just constantly discovering things, doing these laps. I was finding stuff all the time. I'm really curious to see what, the F1 Esports guys do for setups this year. That's the key takeaway from this. I really want to know if I could look into the future in 2 months' time of what setups these guys are going to be running. But nonetheless, that is it for that lap. Again, top of the leaderboards again. We'll run you through the setup real quick. And a few differences here, for example, with the aerodynamics running 4.6 compared to some other ones who have been running like 6.6 or 8.8. One thing I've also picked up on, the new kind of default wings on the aerodynamics this year is 8.8 rather than 6.6. So that seems to be the default value. The rest of the setup though is pretty similar, and no more kind of major changes, and you can see the sector splits as well. We move into Silverstone, this time with the Aston Martin, of course, the home team, because Aston are based literally just outside Silverstone. And this one was good fun as well. There's a tricky one to beat eye contrast time, but we got there in the end. Took me a couple of attempts, and this lap was definitely the best one. The Aston looking very, very nice this year, heading through 3 and 4, trying to take the best possible line. Traditionally, my first sector isn't that great on F1 games, I will admit. Hopefully this was slightly better, and I really enjoyed Silverstone. It's a really satisfying track, but this is one of those circuits where you can tell the rule change and the high speed nerf comes into play. So right now we're going to approach Cops, the old turn 1. It's not really flat. You can do it flat, but it's not necessarily faster because you get a bit of scrub on the rear tyres and a bit of kind of rear sliding. You're actually better off taking a very small lift and then planting the throttle cleanly out of the corner. So that's what I do. Even through here, you just about are able to keep it flat through the right-hander, and you can notice there's a lot less speed through Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel, especially the last two, but still the lap itself was pretty good. Stowe, again, you can't throw the car in, you'll just go straight off the road. You have to take a lot of speed out of the car before entering the corner. You have to really let off the throttle to let the nose and the front tyres bite into the corner and turn in. The final chicane, easy does it. This curve on the outside is a lot more drivable this year. You can definitely lean on that to get some traction. And across the line, 25.1. That was another world record. Looking at the setup, you can see on screen a few differences. The differential, 90/70 for example, which is very different to F1 2020. Also on the suspension, 2.2 and then quadruple 6 all the way down, very different. Seemed to work best for me. The ride height 6.6 gave me good stability, and the car wasn't moving. This is one of those tracks where the car bottoms out quite badly, so you need to have that ride height off the ground. And then finally we move to Spa, which is going to be the last hot lap in this video, and it's going to be in the Red Bull. So here we are preparing the lap. We're going to see if we can once again pick up another world record. And I've noticed the Red Bull camera is slightly different to the other ones, so I'm running the exact same settings for every car, but the Red Bull seems to be a bit more further forward. Nonetheless, down towards turn 1 you can brake a lot later this year. I noticed it at Spa quite a lot. You can definitely late brake a lot more than you would in F1 2020, as long as you straight line brake. Very important difference here. Out of turn 1, flat out up through Eau Rouge, and now Radion, of course, onto the Camel Straight. You take a little bit of a breather now, 10 seconds or so, flat out on the throttle. And then Les Combes. I found the inside curbs make you spin, so I actually try to stay off them as much as possible and just take a nice clean run. You can really throw the car through. Again, the cars are quite fast in medium speed corners and low speed corners this year, so you can throw the car in. Turn 8 through here, the car has a lot of grip. Turn 9, I got a bit out of shape there, but we managed to hold on to the car and keep it within track limits. I ended up gaining a bunch of time. Pouon, again, you can feel through here the car just doesn't quite have the same amount of front end as on F1 2020, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. Then heading into this little right-left chicane, 5th gear, sacrificing the right to open up the left. Inside curve is actually quite drivable. Bring the car to the left-hand side for Stavlo. Again, using all of the curbing through here, that's the fastest way around Spa. And I take a nice tight line on the exit to really kind of shorten the run on this back straight. And now pretty much you're just preparing the bus stop chicane. You can brake so much later here. I noticed it straight away, even after the 100-meter board. I really pushed this one. I did that even later on other attempts, but you can see here, I broke at about 85 meters before the chicane, and then 2nd gear, short shift into 3rd, and then smooth on the traction as we opened DRS, and set at 140.9, which is not bad. I think my best lap around Spa is like a 140.5 in F1 2020, so that was not bad at all. And there is the final world record. You guys can see the setup on screen now, and yeah, pretty much, guys, that's going to be it from me for this video here today. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, guys. We've got more content coming very soon, so do stay tuned for that. As always, a big shout out to the members of the channel for supporting the content. And as always, if you haven't done so already, check out the 2 videos on screen if you have missed them. But that is it from me here today, and I'll see you guys next time.